We now go on with the program with 6 lightning talks. The speakers got only 5 minutes, and we'll give you a sign if the last minute is in. First speaker is Douglas McCarthy from Europeana. So go ahead.
Thank you. Goedemiddag. Good afternoon. I'm Douglas McCarthy. I'm an open GLAM advocate and researcher, and I'm currently a collections manager at the Europeana Foundation in Den Haag. In the next few minutes, I'd like to talk about with you how we as cultural heritage institutions communicate open access to our online users, so very much from a UX perspective. As the Greek physician Hippocrates once said, ars longa, vita brevis, which roughly means copyright is hard and life is very short. Now, as GLAM professionals, part of our job is to make the complex and difficult world of licensing and copyright as easy and as simple as possible for our users, for our audiences to understand. So how's that going? For the last 18 months, I've been leading a global survey of open access in the GLAM sector with Dr. Andrea Wallace of the University of Exeter. And during that work, we've observed a few opportunities for clarification and consistency, and I'd like to share those with you today with some examples. I have 3 golden rules for you today. Rule number 1, let's be clear. When we look at individual artworks, such as this painting by Jan Steen in the wonderful Rijk Studio, as a user, I'm invited to download a beautiful high-resolution image. But is it immediately clear on what terms I can do that? Can you see a rights statement or can you see a license there? If we expand the page and look further down, we can indeed see the text, copyright, public domain. Okay, good. But is it clear what this is referring to? Could it be the object metadata? Is it the digital image? Or is it maybe both? There is some ambiguity here and an opportunity for clarification. The Rijksmuseum's API terms and conditions and its wonderful new data portal launched today are actually much more explicit and clear about this. So perhaps Rijk Studio can be updated to reflect that too. When it comes to GLAM terms of use, too long didn't read is a real challenge. This is the word count of a small sample of GLAM terms, and they range from the Wellcome Library's few hundred words to the whopping almost 4,000 words of the V&A in London, which could be challenging for anyone, let alone an ordinary non-specialist user. And sometimes these terms are literally unreadable. Some of this has a technical dimension. In March this year, I conducted a personal independent audit of Flickr Commons, and I discovered that only 50% of the 120 participating institutions in Flickr Commons have working web resources that link to their copyright policies. So link rot, as it's known, and which was discussed in this excellent article by my former Europeana colleague, Marjolein de Vos, is a real challenge in our world. We should also seek to be humble and reasonable in our terms. The Museum of Fine Arts in Boston states that its images express the scholarly and aesthetic views of the museum and are protected by copyright. Yet, at the same time, MFA is licensing these works to commercial retailers such as Uniqlo, and I have this t-shirt, it's great. Is this scholarly and aesthetic expression of the museum's mission? Well, that's up for discussion. Rule number 2 is, let's be consistent. We often see mismatches in licenses and rights statements across different web platforms. Here's a manuscript in Europeana with the public domain mark. Okay. Here's the same item on the provider's website. The public domain mark is not listed anywhere. In fact, if you look at the terms and conditions, they're explicit that these works are only available for personal and non-commercial use, something quite different. This kind of inconsistency really does not help the user get to grips with what she or he can and cannot do. Rule number 3 is let's be standard. Right now, there are a dizzying variety of verbal and graphical expressions, open content identifiers, as this slide demonstrates of a sample of open GLAMs. So I think here is a real opportunity for standardization and consistency to help our users. So who's doing a great job in this space? Well, as a role model, I'd like to recommend Museums Victoria in Australia, who use clear language around reuse and attribution. They link directly to Creative Commons licenses, and all of this is on the item page. No need to go to a footer or download a PDF and read something. It's all right there. If you want to read more about this, I recommend the work of Kelly Fitzpatrick, and perhaps this article I published in the summer is on a similar topic. So let's help our users by being clear, consistent, and standard whenever we can. Thank you very much.
Okay, next speaker will be Marianne Grootveld from DANS. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. And I will be presenting also work by my colleague Eliane Fankhauser. Well, you know, sorry seems to be the hardest word. But there is also a very easy word, which is fair, as in fair data. Actually, the notion of fair has been embraced, endorsed by so many people, it's on a par with love and world peace. But there are challenges. There are at least 50 shades of fairness. It is a gradual notion, it's not black and white. And that gives us a reason that we want to measure the level of fairness. At DANS, Data Archiving and Networked Services, where Eliane and I work, we explored a couple of metrics, and the one I'm going to present today is measuring the fairness of data that is already in a repository or about to be deposited in a repository. And we do this because we don't want to promote just reusability, but actual reuse of worthy data in a repository. We know about trustworthy repositories, we run one ourselves, and we believe that repositories play a major role in making data fair and keeping data fair. 2 slides with examples from this tool. It is available for testing and we welcome your feedback on it. And you will see that the questions are similar to FAIR principles, but we use the metrics tool also to promote awareness about long-term preservation. That means we don't ask about persistent identifiers because we know we will assign a persistent identifier. But we do ask if metadata will remain available even when the data disappear, perhaps at some time. And we ask about personal data, not because it's part of the FAIR data principles, but because data which contain personal information have an impact on the access regime and also on usage licenses, so that's awareness raising. Under the notion of interoperability, we also try to convey how important it is to deliver and to keep files in a certain format, which is fit for eternity, I would almost say, but it's usually also fit for interoperability. This match is not perfect, but there is a good overlap between file formats for the long term and file formats you can relatively easily share and combine. And on reusability, we all know that researchers and other potential users of research data will only download and use existing data if they trust them. And that requires good documentation, extensive documentation and information, including information about the provenance of the data, like the way the data were collected, or if you used existing data before the proper citation, and so on. So with this tool, this metrics tool, we hope to strengthen the awareness of good data. When you've run through the metrics tool, you get some score. Now, it is a matter of debate if percentages of progress bars are useful or not. We think at least an indication of the fairness of a particular data set is important. And the tool then also provides some tips how you can improve the fairness. We do this for the F, A, R, and R questions. Like I said, it is a test, so if you don't like these percentages and have a better idea, let us know. to conclude, probably within the 5 minutes, we do believe that fair data are already here, but there are different degrees. And seeing that this tool was based on research data coming from academy, I'm very interested to learn from you in the next break perhaps, or later on, if it's also useful and feasible for the GLAM world. Thank you very much.
Okay, we now have a duo presentation. It's Tunis van Oort from Create and Marcus Cohen from Den. Go ahead.
Hello. I have a background in the performing arts, and I wonder, in the collection of the Rijksmuseum, what can we find about theater?
Well, when we search for theater, we get about 2,500 hits. You're interested in theater, and my main interest in cinema. So if we look at film, we get about 500 hits.
But in contrast to the physical collection containing material objects, the performing arts have to do with intangible heritage. So this live experience, how can we capture a live experience, assuming we don't have a time machine and travel back in time and buy a ticket and relive the actual performance?
Well, yeah, this is the time machine. So if we want to recapture these past performances, we require a combination of different sources stored in different places. For example, scripts, set pieces, film reels, theater building, but also information about audiences at the time.
The problem seems to me that these types of materials can be found in a great variety of cultural heritage collections scattered all over the land.
True. For instance, there's theater institutions, film institutions, municipal archives, art history institutions, and then there's also like academic resources like this online film encyclopedia Cinema Context, or the onstage database on theater performances in Amsterdam from the Golden Age, both from the University of Amsterdam.
So in order to understand more about the history of performing arts, it's important to combine these data. We could use maybe fair data, but still it remains how to really bring that alive.
Well, one good way to combine all these different sources is via historical maps through the place where cultural events take place, literally. And bringing data together via maps is more than just linking information. It's also a way to provide new insights.
But how do you envisage that? There are a lot of detailed data sets from local municipalities, like on the maps.amsterdam.nl. But these are actual data. You can't go back far in time with these data.
True, so maybe we should try to build a time machine then. So in Amsterdam, there's the Amsterdam Time Machine, which is currently being built at the University of Amsterdam. It's a series of map layers with which you can move through space and time. And the location serves as a linking point to connect different kinds of historical information. For instance, we could look up a certain year and look what happened in Amsterdam in 1885. Well, at the left you can see the Rijksmuseum was built in that year, and we can link through to the geo-information about this building that was being built in that year.
Well, interesting, Professor, but who is working on this?
Well, like I said, it is being developed at the University of Amsterdam, but we have a lot of partners also from heritage institutions. And this is also part of a European consortium, a European initiative, which contains a lot of time machines throughout Europe.
Okay, but can you give a concrete example, so which could enlighten us and tell a bit more about performing arts in the past?
We could start by looking at the places of where we're talking about theater and cinema. So if we look at the blue dots, these are theaters throughout the city. What happens when cinema, a new medium, suddenly comes at the scene around 1910? You'll see this big boom of the red circles are cinema. So this gives us an idea of how cinemas and theaters are clustered throughout the city. We could also look at how cinema locations are related to public transportation, for instance.
Okay, so we can see some interaction between theater and films on a city level. It's a bit abstract. Could you please give a concrete example and zoom in?
Of course. Let's zoom in on a specific cinema. We're at the Rijksmuseum, so let's look at the Rembrandt Theater, which was both a cinema but also had live stage shows at the time. One example can give us an opportunity to link through all these different collections and different kinds of sources that we need to reconstruct performances. For instance, there's a photo of the Rembrandt Theater from the City Archive.
And were there any live performances staged there? Like, say, a Shakespearean play?
Well, first of all, we can find through the Cinema Context database, there was a German film based on the Merchants of Venice that even premiered in the Rembrandt Theater, and we can link to IMDb if we want to have more information about this film.
And was that also performed live on stage, or?
Yes, if we look at the Theatre Institute, we can find that this same play was also performed live, The Merchants of Venice, also at the Rembrandt Theater. And here we even have a playbill from the time, which shows Louis Bouwmeester, one of the very famous Dutch actors, played his signature role, Shylock, and was also the director.
Louis Bouwmeester himself. He is the famous actor which is the most important Dutch award on theater. The Louis d'Or is named after Louis Bouwmeester.
And here we see even he's immortalized in a painting in this same role, Shylock, which is from the Arcadie side.
I wish I could have seen a performance by Louis Bouwmeester.
Well, perhaps I can indulge you, because we can even find some moving images from the time when Louis Bouwmeester, played his role in the Rembrandt Theater. Hope it works. So here we see the actual audience of 1920 in the Rembrandt Theater, and I also wanted to show Bouwmeester, but I'm afraid I skipped over that slide. We get a second chance. Yeah. So here's Mr. Bouwmeester greeting the audience.
Well, Louis Bouwmeester. It's now you mention him. I think there's the bust here at the Rijksmuseum.
True. Unfortunately, it's not yet available digitally.
Alas. Well, in remembering the words of Saskia Scheltjens, who opened this morning, let's play. Thank you.
Next speaker is Edda Japing from the Arcadie.
Yes. Good afternoon, I'm Edda Japing and I'm from the Arcadie, the Netherlands Institute for Art History. And I'm going to tell you about a recent project of ours that is all about sharing, and we're very excited about it. It's called Artists for All. Well, first, a little bit about us. We're the Netherlands Institute for Art History. We're located in The Hague. And we're one of the world's leading art history documentation and research institutes. And we manage archives, documentation and photographic material, and we have a large art historical library, so it's very diverse. We've also got 8 online databases, together containing millions of records. And, well, the most widely known use of these are two. The Arcady Images contains images of artworks, and Arcady Artists. And this is a database containing biographical information about artists, Dutch and foreign, from the Middle Ages on to the present day. And the ampersand at the end signifies that it also contains other art historical figures, such as art historians, art dealers, and collectors. Now, we really want to keep this database up to date and as complete as possible, but this is a lot of work. So we knew we had to make this a more collaborative effort, to work together to create a more complete database for everyone. So therefore, we will now be enabling experts in their fields from outside the Arcady to make changes and to add records to our database. And these changes will be edited by us. And we will also enable others to use the Arcady Artist data in their own systems by making it available as open data. So this will create a kind of round trip, so people can add new artists or new data to existing records. And then they will be able to use this data immediately in their own systems, so sharing both ways. Well, we chose to work with professionals and not everyone, because if we would do it, if we would make a kind of Wikipedia-like setup, it would take way too much editing for us. We don't have that kind of manpower, so we need to be able to know that the information that will be added to the database is trustworthy. So now let me show you how it works. Well, we created an online application, and to get there, well, you can go directly to the URL, but you can also get there through our website. So experts will get a special role in our website, so if they log in and they go to the correct record that they want to edit, at the bottom they will see this black button, edit this record, and if they click that, they go to the artist role application, straight to the correct record. Well, this is what it looks like. It's built in Axio Collections, a new online adlib, and it contains almost all the fields that are present in the database. So they can really add a lot to it. Well, what happens if a record is changed or if a new record is added? It will be visible on our website within 15 minutes. If it's a change, then the original record is archived, and the record is flagged for review by our editor. Well, the editor reviews this change or addition, checking mostly for correct use of our database fields and if correct sources were given for the information that is added. Now, if this change is accepted, then we will just unflag the record and nothing else happens. If the change is rejected, then the archived version of the record will be restored, and of course there will be some communication to the expert about the reasons for rejection. Now, as for the other part, Arcady Artists will be available as open data through the NDE network of terms data environment, at least for the next few years. And for the mapping of the database elements, we used schema.org because that is widely used, and it will also be available in multiple common formats such as RDF XML and JSON LD. And which is also very nice, the Dutch Museum of Literature, which has also participated in our pilot study testing the application, will now be implementing Arcady Artists as a thesaurus in their own collection management system. So we hope that many others will follow, either contributing to the database or using it in their own systems, or maybe both. So thank you for your attention. And
our next speaker is already here, David. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Thank you. It's David from Perfect Blue, by the way.
Yes, I'm very happy to be here today. It's my first time in this building. What you're watching now on the screen is one of my artworks, and it's made from hundreds of details from different paintings made by Lucas Krana. And I want to walk you through a little bit of my process, how I work with this material. To the left here you see a sibling image to the first one you saw, and it's Lucretia, which is a person that Lucas Krana depicts in many different versions. And I'm going to walk you through a little bit the different steps on how this work is created. What I do is I download hundreds and thousands of images mostly from museum collections, but also from commercial actors like Sotheby's and Christie's, the auction houses, or wherever I can get hold of them. And I always need a really high resolution, and sometimes a screenshot or download. And I make these kind of vast archives of different snippets and parts and details. And I heard that the museum here has 22 terabytes of files. I think I have 8, so I'm kind of getting close. And then I take these different details and I compose them very freely, almost like a painter would compose an image. So what you see here is different parts of, Lucas Cranach makes these different portraits of people that are usually in confined rooms. And in the case with Lucretia, it's a pretty horrific scene where she commits suicide, but your eye can always escape out through a window in the background where you also see a landscape. So I've used all these different landscapes and kind of turned the image inside out, and I've used different inversions, and I show the landscape in the nature through the body of Lucretia in this case. And in the end, my artworks always become both like a digital representation, but also a physical object that I also try to exhibit in different galleries and museum contexts. And I work a lot with the kind of physical parts of the image, and they're usually fairly large since I use so many details, and also can work with so much material. But I'm going to show you also more of the physical aspect of these artworks, but through this image that I call the floating world, and it's made from hundreds of ukiyo Japanese woodblock prints from the 18th and 17th century that I work together. So the central part of this big image is printed on traditional mulberry fiber koso paper, and then the blue border is printed on lacquered wood that is behind the soft paper. And this becomes a pretty big and solid piece, and if you would be able to see the physical version of this, you could also kind of see all the different types of prints, all the different types of paper that's been used originally. So I basically make a big archive of these artworks. And if you look at the wave here in the middle, you see kind of the original piece and then how I use a detail. So this C is made from maybe 100 different woodblock prints and a multitude of artists. And as you see, it's also like a big digital composite that I can move around and kind of create this composition from. And I always include some contemporary links to my work. In this case, I've been shooting at the same locations in Tokyo and in that area as depicted in the woodblock prints. And I've also been looking at street culture and the different cosplay genres that also plays with these ancient female roles in this case. And here you also see how the lacquered wood has this kind of soft yellow print in front of it, and the printing goes in even behind the paper print. And I've mostly exhibited my works in these types of works, with historical artworks, in commercial galleries, but this piece is the only one I've also shown in like an institution or museum context. This was a big Hokusai exhibition in Stockholm that I showed this work as a reference point of a contemporary artwork that also used a material. A lot of it is Hokusai, a lot of it is from this institution and Metropolitan Museum and a lot of other institutions that might be present here today. And yeah, that's also one of the reasons that I'm showing you this today, is that I'm always curious in comments and questions about this type of work, and I want to also bring it back to the source where I collected all these images. So what you're looking at here is a piece that I call the Green Ruin, and it's made from a couple of hundreds of paintings, and mostly of them are from this institution, about ruins basically, that are combined into this big artwork with all its lush details. And I'm gonna finish there and just say that what I've shown you now is just like a fraction of all the different artworks I have, and I hope that yeah, if you're interested, I have both prints that I can show you, and I have like a big digital presence with my different artworks, and I think that they span not just over different institutions that are here maybe today or watching online, but also from different genres, different artists, and different times. So thank you so much for listening.
And now we are ahead of the last presentation by Brigitte. Brigitte Vetsina from Europeana. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start with a little story. A story that starts in 1970, quite far away from here in the South Pacific. A Swiss ethnomusicologist travels to the Solomon Islands, just off Papua New Guinea, and makes a recording of a young woman called Afunakwa singing an age-old lullaby to her daughter or her child. Then Zemb deposits that recording with a traditional music archive at UNESCO in Paris. And then many, many years later, someone takes that recording and remixes it, fuses it with techno house dance rhythms, and produces it as the international mega hit Sweet Lullaby on the 1992 Deep Forest album. Now, this album is a great success. It sells millions of copies, and the track is even put to all sorts of commercial uses, including ads for shampoo and other kinds of uses. In return, though, not 1 cent goes to Afunakwa or her community. No one ever bothered asking Afunakwa if she wanted her song to be on this track. And perhaps more alarmingly, Afunakwa is not credited for her performance. In fact, the track is described by its publisher as, I quote, a rare and unusual mix of ambient modern music and the traditional songs of the pygmies of the Central African rainforest, which, by the way, is just 15,000 kilometers away. So why am I telling you all this? Well, this song even came to be known as the Pygmy Lullaby. Well, GLAMs fulfill the invaluable mission of making cultural heritage available to the public, for the public to access and use and reuse, and I'm pretty sure I don't have to convince you of the importance of this mission. However, sometimes that mission can conflict with the rights and interests of the indigenous communities that have been the traditional guardians of this cultural heritage. And one big concern is that making cultural heritage available can unintentionally open the door to uses that are offensive or that can cause harm to the traditional guardians. In other words, it can open the door to what we call cultural appropriation. But actually, GLAMs are in a key position to ensure that the cultural heritage that they make available from their collections is used in a way that is respectful of the traditional guardians and in a way that aligns with their wishes. Let me explain a bit better. For some cultural heritage, some uses that are allowed under copyright law because the material is considered to be in the public domain or the use is allowed under an exception, these uses can still be inconsiderate or inappropriate and can cause harm to the communities. That's because there are other rules. The access and use can still be governed by customary law. And acting in violation of the customary law can be really harmful and really hurt communities because their cultural heritage is part of who they are today. Now, GLAMs have to seize the opportunity of opening their collections online to engage in meaningful relationships with the communities whose heritage is in their collections. I also believe that they have a role to play in educating their users about how to interact with this cultural heritage in a way that is respectful. And there are many resources that are currently available to support GLAMs in sharing Indigenous cultural heritage online, and I'm happy to share examples with you later on. But to conclude, GLAMs are located at the junction between the traditional bearers and the public. and the quest to opening up collections online presents a unique chance to find a nuanced, respectful, and fair approach to sharing and caring, in collaboration with the traditional guardians of this heritage who have shared and cared for their own cultural heritage for a great many generations. Thank you for your attention.